By the end of Cyberpunk Edge Runners, David Martinez is an absolute unit. But is his build really a viable playstyle in the game? I wanted to find out, so like any sane person, it only makes sense to attempt to create a killing machine so devastating that it makes V the new Night City version of Chuck Norris. Just know that V once threw a grenade and killed 6 Tiger Claw gang members, and then it exploded. But what makes David David? In the show, we see him fighting with his bare hands, pistols, a shotgun for like 2 seconds, a projectile launcher, and mainly Sandevistan. The Sandy. I'm just gonna call it the Sandy from here on out. Before we get into the Sandy though, we need to go over which attributes I bought into. I'll keep it simple. David Strong, David Fast, David Cool. And then just dump the remaining in tech, I guess. We can ignore intelligence because, well, as much as we love David dumb. So starting out with body, obviously we maxed that out at 20. Going into athletics, all of these perks are basically going to be for health regeneration, increased health, reduced stamina cost, can't get knocked down, regen health quicker while moving, this kind of stuff. So basically you can take a whole bunch of damage and not worry about needing to hit a med kit every 2 seconds to keep up with the amount of damage that you're taking. Next, for Street Brawler, obviously we're going to drop quite a few points into this one as well because David liked using his hands the most. We saw him use a pistol a couple times, like I said, but honestly, nothing is better than those handy old fists. And as far as the Sandevistan build goes anyway, melee works a little bit better. I'll go into that a bit more here in just a moment. But know that the Street Brawler perk tree is going to make your punches absolutely devastating. Following that up, we have Reflexes, which, like I said, also 20. David likes using a handgun, so we are going to go ahead and hop into handguns first. If I'm being completely honest, I would almost rather trade out the handgun perk tree for the blades perk tree. The video that I had posted a few days ago was obviously with a sword build. I basically redid those perks, took all of them off of blades, and I put them into pistols. So it just reduces recoil, increases damage, all that kind of stuff for pistols, so you could be pretty nasty with the pistol. But I'd almost say it's more worth it to go into blades. A Sandevistan build just caters much more to a melee build than a ranged build. And the reason why that is because your body moves as fast as it wants to in Sandevistan. Unfortunately, you cannot make a gun shoot faster in Sandevistan. So if you're using like a revolver, and if you use the Sandevistan we're going to be using in this build, you're going to be able to maybe shoot once or twice, and that's just not going to work. Meanwhile, you'll be able to pull a blade out and literally become a human food processor. For our cool attribute, we are also at 20, because obviously David was pretty cool in the show. I think we can all agree on that. There's only a couple perks in Ninjutsu I think you should get, mainly just because this is primarily for a stealth build. So we get some increased damage for human enemies and maybe some movement buffs, but otherwise all that other stuff's kind of pointless for us. No need to have it, considering we are the complete opposite of a stealth build. Alright, and finally, one of my favorite and personally felt slept on perk trees, Cold Blood. Cold Blood is insane. If you haven't utilized this perk tree, I would heavily suggest throwing a couple points in there regardless of your attribute level. There's a ton of buffs for all sorts of different kinds of play styles, so you'll definitely be able to find one that caters to yours, and it'll just level it up for sure. Sorry, I got something in my throat, man. But Cold Blood is really cool because basically you just unlock Cold Blood. After defeating an enemy, you gain Cold Blood for 7 seconds and increase your movement speed by 2%. You can stack it up to 3 times, and each additional stack is 1 second shorter, blah blah blah. Who cares? Just give me that speed boost. The speed boost is going to be huge because even when using the Korenzakov, which is going to be in this build, it'll allow you to move really quickly even when you are physically slowed down, because the Korenzakov doesn't slow down time quite the same way as the Sandevistan. But basically Cold Blood just allows you to get an insane stack of buffs in the middle of combat. And it can also save your life entirely by consuming your stacks of Cold Blood to prevent you from getting flatlined. For intelligence, nothing. Literally no use. The reason why there's no use is because intelligence has to do with your ability to quick hack and do stuff like that. But since we are replacing our cyber deck with the Sandevistan implant, Then there is no reason to spec into intelligence. And then tech, obviously I said dump the remaining points you have into tech. I didn't really put much in here just because this was on an older version of the game, which allowed lower level tech with crafting and being able to make a lot of money. So unfortunately that has been patched out, and making money is not as easy with a super low tech. But as far as the build for David goes, nah. We're just leaving tech as low as we can, just because David was not techie. He turned down Pilar's mitts even because he said they were techie. So with that being said, we don't need tech. And I know a lot of people say that you can't have a cyberpunk build without tech, but I mean, give me a little bit of a challenge, right? You can't have everything too easy. So that is all of the attributes and perks for the David Martinez build. Next up, we got to go into the cyberware. And no build is complete without getting absolutely chromed out, as they say. So starting up at the Frontal Cortex, David is dumb, so we can't really equip anything besides heal on kill, which is a huge part of this build for being able to tank entire groups of enemies in a second. Our Ocular System doesn't really matter, but throw some mods in there for good measure, whatever your playstyle is. Our Circulatory System is something of legend, truly. First, we got the Bio Monitor, which instantly restores health to 100% if dropped below 15%. There's a little bit of a cooldown, but no worries, because next, we got that Bio Conductor. This reduces all cyberware cooldowns by 30%, and this is probably going to be one of the biggest when it comes to this David Martinez build. And last but not least in the Circulatory System is Second Heart. It instantly restores 100% of max health when dropped to 0. So if you actually do get flatlined and die entirely, it'll like and like send out this electrical shock, and you'll like rise from the grave looking like the Undertaker coming out of that coffin, which is pretty sick. Before moving on, let's recap. In our Cold Blood stack, we have multiple damage reductions, an even way to avoid lethal damage through Cold Blood. Besides that, we have the Bio Monitor, which will heal us before we even get that lethal damage. Then Second Heart to fully revive us if you do utilize both the Bio Monitor and the Cold Blood Restoration. An absolute multiple life tank. In the immune system, I have the Pain Editor, which reduces incoming damage by 10%. And then I also got the Shock and Awe to electrocute my enemies when they think they can do damage against me when I'm in their personal bubble, absolutely rearranging their guts. Ew. Phrasing. And then in our nervous system, we are going to have that legendary Kerenzikov, which allows us to slow down time by 90% for 3.5 seconds. Unfortunately, when you are using the Kerenzikov, it doesn't really slow down time quite like the Sandevistan does. So you can't punch as fast, you can't move as fast, so on and so forth. But fortunately, we have so many of those other movement buffs that if you're in combat and you use it, you'll still literally be like gliding around on the ground like it's an ice rink. But to complement both the Kerenzikov and the Sandevistan we will also be using, we have these nano relays, which increases the duration on both of those by 2 seconds, which is huge, especially for the Sandevistan we are going to use in this build. The Integumentary System has increased armor, because why not? I also have optical camo on this build, but that's more of a personal gameplay choice. It's ultimately unnecessary, but it does make sneaking a cakewalk since you no longer have access to quick hacks when using the Sandevistan cyberware. Finally, I got Fireproof, which obviously gives us immunity to burn. And the reason why I did that is because my man David was stuck in a burning car and literally just made it out unscathed, pretty much. I mean, he might have had a couple bumps and bruises, but no third-degree burns on that body. Alright, we are almost at the bread and butter of this build, but if you are enjoying the video, I'd be delighted if you let me know what piece of cyberware you think is 100% crucial to any build. For our skeleton, you know I had to go with the micro rotors to increase attack speed by 25%, which is huge, especially if you're planning on using blades or like the mantis blades or anything like that. But it works for fists too. To complement that, we have dense marrow, which will increase base damage from melee weapons at the trade-off of stamina cost. You'll do more damage, but it'll reduce your stamina quicker. But I mean, we're so statted into athletics and the body and everything like that. that it's literally not even an issue. Kind of a... Could probably trade that out for something else if you really wanted to. Hands, they don't really matter, but I guess if you want to use any of the weapons that David uses, you can either install a smart link for the Arasaka Yukimura smart pistol, or the Kengtao L69 smart shotgun, or like I have installed the ballistic processor for other pistols he uses, like the Militech M10 AF Lexington. For my arms, you know I had to go with the Gorilla arms. I know in the show David has a projectile launcher which he got from Maine, but for those fist fights you have to choose the Gorilla arms. Mod them as you see fit, but I have the animals mod for it so it causes internal bleeding for when you don't quite one-punch man someone. I didn't record this little section, but the legs, I think you got to go with the reinforced tendons for the double jump. I'm pretty sure in the show he may have the fortified ankles, but for gameplay purposes and just responsiveness and overall fun, double jump is the move. And finally, onto what makes this build the build it is, the Sandevistan, or Sandevistan, the Sandy. Now, unfortunately, it isn't disclosed in the anime exactly what kind of Sandy David acquires, but we do know it's top shelf. So you know what that means. Miss me with the rares and the epics. Not even worth my time. Not even worth it. Now, there are a few you can go with, and I'm not making this video as the definitive guide to David Martinez, but any of them really will do the trick. But while trying to stay as faithful to the anime, the Sandy that allows you to move the fastest is going to be the Chianti.
Nice Chianti.
Anyway, maybe the Chianti Mark V Warp Dancer. What this is going to allow us to do is to slow down time for 8 seconds to 10% speed, which is kind of bonkers. But unfortunately, it's really a short duration. This can be found at the Ripper Dock in downtown. You will need 18 reflexes, and I'm pretty sure like 50 street cred, so definitely not an early game build. Once you get your reflexes and your street cred up a little bit though, feel free to swap out any of the Sandevistans for this build, and you will be unstoppable early game. Like literally this cyberware is just like the I win button. Obviously, earlier I said we skipped out on tech, which is a bit of a bummer with this build, as it would definitely be in our interest to be able to craft higher level heat sinks for quicker cooldown, or overclocked processors for increased duration. Since I can't really craft anything in this build, I got lucky and I found a rare heatsink and an uncommon one. So together that removes 5.5 seconds from the cooldown. Then with the bioconductor, we get another 30% off that time, which takes another like 7.5 seconds off of our cooldown time, making it so we can engage the Sandy about every 16 seconds. I've also got an overclocked processor, so its duration is slightly increased, then boosted another 2 seconds because of those nano relays. Obviously, the most ideal thing would be able to get like 3 of those legendary heat sinks, which I think takes off 4 seconds. So you'd be able to take off 12 seconds off of that 30-second time, which would make it 18, and then you take 30% off of that, so that would make it 12 seconds. So you get this down to 12 seconds if you have a high-tech build. So you've got a strong tank who can eat damage like it's a 3 AM drunk run to buck a slice, can't get knocked down, health regen inside and outside of combat, and for defeating enemies, that is further increased by other perks, multiple lives just in case you get overwhelmed, tons of damage reductions, an absolutely insane DPS with fists or pistols, more speed and movement than you can accurately control, and multiple ways to slow down time to 10% speed multiple times a minute. If that's not an OP David Martinez build, I am not sure what is. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Now watch this drive.